Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Ram Prakash, for your kind introduction. I am also very grateful for the Indian Institute of World Culture for giving me this opportunity to deliver a series of lectures right from the year 2015. Last month, the lecture number 2 in this series, French Enlightenment, was delivered. That was about the French encyclopedia movement started by Diderot, Denis Diderot. The last T is not pronounced, D-I-D-E-R-O-T, Diderot. About him I lectured, and it was a monumental work during that period in the European thought. So the period which I am taking, I want to make it clear because some of you have come for the first time. The French Enlightenment period is somewhere the end of the 17th century and the whole of the 18th century. That is the period in the European history. That period is known as the Enlightenment period. And different countries of Europe have participated in it, and their contribution is there. So you have the Scottish Enlightenment, German Enlightenment. In fact, Kant wrote an essay, What is Enlightenment? And he got a prize also for that. So, but then France has got a very special place in it because of so many thinkers, in France who were, questioning all the established, ideas. So that's why the French Enlightenment is also separately studied. And we are going to have some more philosophers apart from, I started with Voltaire. Voltaire is the best known name in French thought. It was a great, multi-sided genius. His writings, collected works, they go to more than 150 volumes. Still you have a Voltaire Society in England who are studying it. Such prolific and enormous output he had. Then Diderot's work was extremely difficult, Over a period of 20 years, he compiled articles for the encyclopedia. And that brought a great revolution in the European thought. Now today we are going to take up the third in the series. His name for short, Montesquieu. Montesquieu. So, very great name. And those who have studied political theory, political thought, constitution and all, surely they would have heard of Montesquieu. It's a very great name. The American Constitution has been inspired by him. Many constitutions, including the Indian, later we will study about it. The concept known as the separation of powers is mainly due to him. He was a genius. I have to tell you something about his life. He was born in the year 1689. Remember, just 100 years before the French Revolution. 1789, everybody knows, is the French Revolution. And he was born in 1689. Born in a very wealthy family, nobles. That society was stratified in those days, The common man would be there, but then the wealthy landlords, those who had titles and all that, the aristocratic class. So he belonged to that aristocratic class. So when he was born, his name was Charles Louis. That is the French name. And his mother was of English extraction, ancestry to England, his mother. Also Protestant, remember. But then he was a Catholic. His father also very wealthy. He was in the military also. He was a noble. So he was fairly coming from a wealthy family. And when his mother died also, she inherited a lot of wealth. and he inherited the barony. Baron is a title, in the Western countries, England and France and all. Baron is a title of a noble. So he inherited that. He inherited a lot of wealth. His birthplace was a place called La Brede near Bordeaux. Bordeaux, you would have heard of the Bordeaux wine in France, very famous, wine growing region there. So he was born there. So very wealthy, but he lost his mother when he was 7. And he was sent to a good school. Of course, he was brought up as a Catholic. Father was a Catholic, mother was a Protestant. And he was sent to a good school, and then he studied law in the Bordeaux University. So that was his, and he never had any dearth for money and all that. And he had an uncle, who was also a noble. And when the uncle died, he inherited, his office also, barony. So that uncle's barony was called Montesquieu. So that is why the name comes Baron de Montesquieu. So shortly it is easy for us to call him as Montesquieu. So he is a baron, B-R-O-N, baron, inherited a lot of wealth, no problem for money. And he also married a lady who was again a Protestant. So there is always the Protestant connection to Montesquieu, even though he was a Catholic. And his wife was a very able lady. So he could entrust all the business things to her. She could look after the property, wine growing, selling and all that, making money. All that she could do. And he could devote himself for his intellectual pursuits, his travel, everything. So that was his life. So when his uncle died, he inherited the barony, and also his uncle was some deputy president of the Bordeaux Parliament. So that office also he inherited. It's a legal office. So he was completely thoroughly trained legal brain he was. So that is his intellectual background. And he had mainly Bordeaux. He went to Paris also. He established a lot of contacts. And in actually you have to remember that period also in the French history. In French history, the most famous king was Louis XIV. He was also known as the Sun King. He was a great, king. In many ways he was great, but he was also despotic. His period is known as the absolutism in France. He used to say, the state, what is the state? It is me. L'État c'est moi. That was his thing. That was his command. The state is me. And he would say, après moi la déluge. After me it will be deluge. That was his, importance. The Louis XIV. So Louis XIV died in 1750. So at that time, remember, 1690 means Montesquieu was 26 years old. Okay. Then he developed a lot of literary interests. He joined the Bordeaux Academy. He improved his knowledge in many, many disciplines. Remember that period, there was lot of scientific advancements in various fields. Why we call that period as the Enlightenment period? Because they questioned everything, and the importance was given to reason. They wanted to question everything. They welcomed the new ideas, fresh ideas, the scientific approach. They did not respect authority in this age. So many thinkers. And they criticized the society. That's very, very important. We studied it in Voltaire. Full of satire in their play, writings, poems. Everywhere, they would question, they would mock at the society, at the foolishness of the people, all that. So that is why these thinkers, during the Enlightenment period in France, they were known as philosophers. They were not the philosophers in the accepted sense of the term, they going to the university, doing some thesis and all that. No. They were all thinkers. They were multifaceted people, They studied many things. They observed society and they used all their genius, their literary talents to awaken the society. That is what Voltaire did, that's what Diderot did. They wrote a lot of things, criticizing religion especially. That was the most dangerous thing in France during that period, because the grip of the Catholic religion was very deep. Its tentacles spread everywhere, and it was very difficult for a free thinker in France. That's why most of these people, when they published books, they would go to Holland and it would be published anonymously. Holland was the place where a lot of freedom was allowed. It was not strict like France. In France, for anything you publish, you have to get the permission of the king, and the authorities. And there used to be the chief censor. They would censor everything, and if they find something objectionable, you will be sent to the dungeon, the prison. That's all. All these people have suffered. Diderot suffered, prison life. Voltaire also suffered. You make fun of some noble or some important fellow or the king, then you had it. That was the period. So even now, as far as Montesquieu is concerned, what he did, his first work, was a very interesting one. It's available in English translation. It is known as Persian Letters. That's the English translation, Lettres Persanes. So it's a very remarkable work, in the French thought. It immediately gave him all fame and name throughout the Europe. So what is so great about it? It's not a dry philosophical work. It's not something you have to make lots of efforts to understand, like Spinoza's Ethics, which was like a geometry book, Euclid book, very difficult to understand. It was not like that. Then what was it? This Lettres Persanes. It is a sort of epistolary. Epistolary means letters. In the form of letters, he himself says it's a sort of novel in the form of letters. So all completely letters. You'll have letter 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 161 letters are there in the latest edition. Now, who are the characters? The characters are, now you see, two persons are important in this thing. One person's name is Uzbek. Another person's name is Rika. Okay. Who are these fellows? They are Persians. They have come from a city in Persia, the Iran. The present day Iran was the Persia, it. So from Persia, this Uzbek, for some reason, is a courtier, some official, and he and his friend, they are coming. The reason is not clear, but something he did, this Uzbek, so he was not wanted there. So he is going on a foreign tour, and they are coming to France and other places in Europe. So they are the two travelers from Persia. And they go and see Paris and other places in France. They observe the French life. What happens when an Oriental goes to an Occidental country? Immediately what is produced is a cultural shock. That only we were talking with other people. When we go abroad also for the first time to a Western country, even as Indians, I also felt it. When I first went to France and saw the way, the French people behave and all that, the habits and all that, I was also shocked, under shock, because our culture is entirely different. So the same thing, so these people, so these two are important characters in this novel, And there are others also. Now, this Uzbek is an elderly man, middle-aged man. The Rika is more or less a youngster, not married. This Uzbek had 5 wives. So he left them in his native place. So he left the wives. Now the thing is, again the Persian culture, the Oriental culture. So he has left them in his harem. Okay, so the harem is there. So the wives are there. And they are guarded by these slaves and eunuchs. So those who know the ways of, this Oriental culture, the Islamic culture, you will be knowing how the women were guarded. They didn't have any liberty. They were all veiled. They can't simply go out. There is no liberty at all. Everything, they will be constantly watched. Such was the life. Because their conception of, women's freedom, all these things was entirely different. Uzbek says, the moment somebody sees a woman or his wife, she becomes impure. He says that. So he doesn't want any man to see her. So constantly, there's a lot of people, to guard this 5. There will be several people, this chief eunuch, this eunuch, that slaves, and all that. There no freedom at all. So all these things are evident from these letters. How? Because this Uzbek left all his 5 wives there. So he is corresponding with his chief eunuch and other slaves and other friends in Persia. So he is constantly monitoring what these wives are doing, whether they are behaving okay and all, or whether somebody is coming and discipline them, or whether their purity, morals, and all these things are being watched. And these things are evident from these letters. So he gives strict instructions that under no circumstances, they should be allowed, to act in such a manner that their purity is sullied. That was the instruction. So all these things, that is on one side, Uzbek and his harem. And here they come and observe France. First I said there was a cultural shock. So the Uzbek is a slightly older fellow. He's quite intelligent, thoughtful, philosophical. Of course, he doesn't practice it in his home. That's one thing. So he observes the Parisian way of life. Now you see, Montesquieu is very clever. Actually, he wanted to criticize the French people and the Parisian life and their thought and all that. Suppose he does it directly, then he would be in trouble. So, what he creates a fictional character, and he can always escape, See, it's not my view, it is the view of some foreigners, coming to my country, and they are seeing it. So, he won't be taken to task. That was his idea. So, in that guise, actually you have to think that many of Uzbek's views are Montesquieu's views only. And when you read it, it's really a lot of poking fun at the French way of life, the French religion, the French fashion. The women, so much they say the fashion changes that it will be very difficult for a husband. Suppose he leaves his wife and goes to another place and returns home after say 2 or 3 months, then he would have to spend a lot of money for her dress. Their Parisian women, they are so obsessed with fashion, their dress, their high heels, and all these things. He has a dig at the French way of life. And coming to the French religion, Catholic religion only, so these people are surprised. They say this Pope is a magician. The Pope is a magician. Why? Because he makes these people believe that 3 is equal to 1. Now, those of you who know the Christian dogma, the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, so in a way they are all one and the same. That's okay. There's nothing, that is the Christian dogma. So this fellow being Muslim, he pokes fun at it. You see, this Pope really is a magician. He makes all these people, they believe it also, that 3 is equal to 1. Then he makes them believe that when they take wine, it is not wine. When they take bread, it is not bread. You know that in the sacrament, in the Christian religion, the wine is same as the blood of Jesus Christ. The bread is the flesh. See, it requires courage, to question all the Christian dogmas in France and put it in this way, Now I'll tell you, the book was put on the banned list. The Pope has got a big register, the register where, he 1, 2, 3 and all. There are thousands of books which are put on the banned list. So this was promptly banned. That's why, he goes to Holland, and from Holland in an anonymous way, it was published, but people came to know that it is Montesquieu, and he became very famous, because it's a readable book. It's a philosophical novel which is readable. It's not a very dry book. He deals with lots of themes there. It's not only it is about the Parisian life. Say, about the different institutions in France. For example, they have this French Academy. You must have heard of the French Academy in France. It is a highly legislating body for the French language. They are very particular about the purity of the French language. Even today, they resent the intrusion of English into the French language. They call it Anglicism. Even though there are many words, French people, young people, they use English words. They don't want it. They have a French, academy with all the, eyebrows, the French academicians. They will decide whether a particular word has to enter the French language or not. So he ridicules them. He says there was once upon a time very big dispute. What is the issue? The issue is how to pronounce the French letter Q. So lots of disputes were there. So he is ridiculing all these things. He feels that they are futile. So who is ridiculing? It is the Persians. So it is not Montesquieu, but it is actually Montesquieu in the guise of the Persian visitor. And a lot of interesting things about the French women and the Persian women. So actually there will be a bias, and they ridicule the French women. So they are so liberal, they go and talk to any man, all this sort of thing. And where is the, virtue, purity and all, but our women, so like that the Persians is. So he depicts, the mentality, how an Oriental person looks at the Western society. And of course, there are, it is not that everything is negative about the European or the French society. He brings out a lot of other things also. The scientific spirit there, doing the experiment, and finding out. There was lots of scientists were there. And it was always, in France, you have to remember one thing. During the Enlightenment period, they were very much influenced by the British. I have to reiterate it today. Why? When we read the French Enlightenment, when we started the lecture, we started with Voltaire. Voltaire lived in England for some time. He got lots of friends there. In fact, it is said he even attended this funeral of Sir Isaac Newton. And it was Voltaire only who spread the story of Isaac Newton and the apple falling. Remember it. And Voltaire I have already told you, he wrote very beautiful piece of work. Again, it is on letters, lettres philosophic letters. The entire book is about the English thought only. How he had so much praise for the English thought. Why means English, thought at that time it was veering towards empiricism. Means experience, experiment, science, all these things were given importance in England. Unlike France were more rationalistic. Their mind, little above, in the clouds. But whereas the British were the practical people. So Voltaire and other thinkers, even Diderot, they all preferred this British approach to life. So Britain greatly influenced France. So here there is a comparison of the French science, Descartes, and the British, all those things. These are also brought out there. Then there is a discussion about this marriage custom, different types of marriage, polygamy, monogamy. So the polygamy in Islam is being discussed. What are the disadvantages or the advantages of polygamy? And why there is polygamy there. And there is also a discussion on the population problem, the world's population. And there were certain wrong, findings there in these Persian letters. Montesquieu's thesis was the world population is declining, so he is trying to find out the reasons for the why the world population declining, and although he gives a lot of reasons, but they are not true. Like that, there are different ideas. All these things are brought out in these letters. That different people's views. It's not only these two people who write. Their friends in Persia, they write. But most of the letters are written by and received to this Uzbek and Rika. Okay. So this is the thing about it. Different and about the God, the Trinity, and about the other Christian dogmas also. It tells about the Inquisition in Spain, which is a very sordid event in the history of the Catholicism. The Spanish Inquisition, where, for heresies, if you don't believe in the Christian dogma, then they say you are a heretic. When you have to be punished. So there will be the religious courts, and you will be tried, and they will be very happy to burn you at stake. So that will be the punishment, and they will take all your property also. So it was a very notorious period in the history of Catholicism. So he writes about all that in these letters, how this religion, they say all these things. But then, the Christian religion, he is very critical about the Christian religion because of all these happenings. And then what happens, let us see. Finally, this, you have to understand that this entire period of letters is 9 years, from 1711 to 1720. This, and 1715 Louis died, and the next fellow, the king, his grandson, takes over as the king, but he was a young boy, so there was a regent. So it is the period of regency. His uncle was the regent. So it covers that period, 9 years. These letters cover that 9 years period. The interesting thing about this, at the end, what happens? This fellow is also, apart from his tour of Europe, he was obsessed with what is happening to his women in Persia. So he received some disturbing letters that they are not obeying properly. In some cases, some man came to see one lady, one of the wives, And one of the other wives, she had some lesbian relationship. All these things reached this fellow's ears, this Uzbek. He was very furious, but he is not returning. He is not returning to his place. So he keeps on giving instruction to the chief eunuch. You have to take very strong actions on my behalf and see that they are pure, their purity. And there will be so much intrigue inside this harem. It was really hell. So many things happen, and these fellows, these eunuchs, start harassing these women. And finally, every wife is dissatisfied with this fellow, and he was in love with one of the women called Roxanne, was the youngest. He was very much in love with her, this Uzbek, but then finally it happened that she betrayed him. She was in love with another man, and it was found out, and that fellow was killed. Her lover was killed, and this lady was furious. She wrote a very angry letter to Uzbek saying, "What do you think yourself? You are so credulous to believe that I can always act according to your whims. You have kept me in such slavery. Don't you think I have my own mind and I have my own liberty?" So he confesses in that letter that she had a lover, and she detests this fellow Uzbek, who loved her so dearly, and said, "I have my own freedom, but anyhow I have lived it. Don't be such a fool as to believe that I was loving you. I never loved you." So she confesses her own weakness and own thing, and she said, "You cannot see me, I am committing suicide." She commits suicide. There are others also, under certain circumstances. They die. This fellow never returns. So this is the story. More than the story, the observations of these, different writers on the French society, the European society, and the difference between the European way of life and the Oriental. Many things come, It's a treasure house, lots of fables, everything, including something about the Indian sati. That also, it forms part of one of the letters, where they say a woman was compelled to the burning fire, but at the last moment she got converted to Islam. That is the story given there. So all this man, Montesquieu, was a formidable scholar. He had taken lots of resources from different things, and then he has written this. So that is about this, later person. Now we will come to another important, period in his life. See, some of the quotations from the Lettre Person, they are worth reading it. So some few I have selected. So for your information, to kindle your interest, I am reading them. We can take as the philosophic thoughts of Montesquieu. He says, "What unhappy beings men are. They constantly waver between false hopes and silly fears, and instead of relying on reason, they create monsters to frighten themselves with, and phantoms which lead them astray." The importance of clear thought, and you can't be trapped by your own fears, which are phantoms. It's a very beautiful quotation. Then he says, "Those who love to inform themselves are never idle. Though I have no business of consequence to take care of, I am nevertheless continuously employed. I spend my life in examining things. I write down in the evening whatever I have remarked, and what I have seen, and what I have heard in the day. Everything engages my attention, and everything excites my wonder. I am like an infant whose organs, as yet tender, are strongly affected by the slightest objects." The curiosity, the open mind, the observation. Then he says, I can assure you that no kingdom has ever had as many civil wars as the kingdom of Christ. So that, he wrote this. So no wonder it was put in the banned list. They had these wars of religion, very famous wars of religion. Then history is full of religious wars, but we must take care to observe it was not the multiplicity of religions that produced these wars. It was the intolerant spirit. Remember, it was the intolerant spirit of people. He welcomes religion. He doesn't say, I hate religions. But then religion, it has its function in society. But then it is the intolerance. Again, when we lectured on Voltaire and Diderot, we talked about tolerance. So again, this is Montesquieu also. The tolerance is important. This is his contribution. See, we have to, all sorts of people are there, all viewpoints are there. So you have to tolerate. You cannot be a fanatic. Then he says, every man is capable of doing good to another. But to contribute to the happiness of an entire society is to become akin to the gods. So he says it requires education, it requires a certain mentality to see the welfare of the others and to renounce your own selfishness. Then say, yes, the last, these few words, okay. I think this much is enough for this. I will pass on to the other points in Montesquieu. One is this, lecture person, I wish you all, it's available in the internet for download, English translation. Kindly you read it, you may read it in 2 or 3 hours, maximum, it's highly readable. Now, after this, he became very famous and he spent most of his time cloistered, in a room and always thinking and writing. And he employed 6 secretaries, to take out, notes from different books. And it was completely intellectual work. First he wrote something on the, just like, the fall and decline of Rome, there's a very famous English author. So just like that in French, he wrote about the Roman history. That's a monumental work. Afterwards, he wrote what is known as, in English I will tell the title, it is called The Spirit of the Laws. It's a monumental work with 31 books, more than 1,000 pages. Well researched. It took a lot of time, and somewhere in 1748 he published it. It is, when it was published and it was seen by the European thinkers, they were all terribly impressed with his work, and he was immediately acknowledged as one of the best philosophers of the Enlightenment period and a philosopher. The Spirit of the Laws, L-A-W-S, laws. The Spirit of the Laws, a very famous book. It took a lot of time. He did a lot of research. It's really a monumental work. And a person no less than Hume, the British philosopher, had a great praise for him. And people said, just as Sir Isaac Newton discovered the physical laws, you, Montesquieu, you discovered the intellectual laws of the society. So such praise was heaped on him by various thinkers in the Western world. It received very good review. And what was his contribution? And we can always say he was one of the fathers of sociology, because in the spirit of the laws, what he deals with, what is law and how it is related to the society. So he tries to understand the laws. There is not one law. There are different laws in different cultures, different societies. But why such a law is there? He says it is possible for us to understand. He says there is a reason for everything. Don't think things happened in a haphazard fashion. There is a reason, rationality for everything. So this is what I want to find out by studying. So for this, you have to study deeply the history of the world, the various cultures, the history, then the economy, then the commerce, the trade, the geography, the religion, the climate. So various things he had to study, and he says it is very, very important, that we understand how these laws evolve in the society. He says it's very, very important. Why it is important? It's very important so that, the society can be governed properly. That is his concern. So he brings out a lot of principles. He says, and he says there are God-given laws, nature's laws and God's laws. He says, I am not concerned with all that. We cannot do anything with God's laws. God's laws are God's laws. It's okay. Let's not concern, but let's concern with the society and study these laws, and how the study and understanding will help us in maintaining a stable society. That's important. He says, everybody, we want a happy life. So a stable society, a prosperous society, where people are happy, that is the ultimate aim. So let us study and understand how such a society can be brought about. Above all things, he cherished, remember, liberty. Again, the liberty is an important term in the Enlightenment period. When you talk of Locke, or talk of Voltaire, or Diderot, and all these philosophers, the liberty is very, very important. So he says, people have to live in liberty. And what is this liberty? Liberty means when you are living in a civilized society, you have to obey the laws of the society, the laws of the government. When you are obeying the laws of the government and live in peace without harming the other person, he says that is liberty. Liberty is not that I will do whatever I like. I want absolute, unfettered freedom and nobody should question me. That is not liberty. He says liberty is always circumscribed. You live in a society, you are not living alone. There are various theories of society. In that society, okay. And he talks about the different forms of government. That's also very important. So he says you have to obey the laws. And that is, he says, real liberty. And so there should be a system which ensures that an ordinary citizen, he can live without fear of attack by others. That's very important. See, today we take everything for granted. We are at liberty. We are now, enjoying peace, freedom, all that. Behind that, there are so many things. He says that's very, very important. You are taking it for granted, but that is the fundamental requirement of any society. That liberty, that stability of the government also. He speaks very well about the stability, a stable government. So he talks about all these things. So the important things are, he talks about the various forms of government, and broadly he tells the forms of government are, say, you take for example the republican form of government. It may be an aristocracy or democracy. He describes each of them. Then you have the monarchy. There are many places in the world, today still the monarchy is there. Monarchy, where you have one king and then he rules. Then you have this democracy, where the people are sovereign. See, we have democracy. Then you have aristocratic rule also. It was there for the few people, who are at the higher echelons of society, they will be ruling. So then you have the worst form of government, despotism. So these are the three broad forms of the government. His important contribution, he attaches a spirit or a principle for each form of government. So he says the principle of republicanism or democracy is virtue. Virtue is very important principle. It can be elaborated. And as far as your monarchy is concerned, in monarchy he says it is the honor. Honor is an important principle of monarchy. And in despotism it is the fear. The despot rules only by creating fear. Because the despot has no law. He himself is a law unto himself. So he describes very beautifully the characteristics of each of these governments, which I need not elaborate. And then he comes to this question of liberty also. And for that, now the most important principle of Montesquieu today is he was the enunciator of the principle of the separation of powers. So in every system of government, you have the executive function, you have the legislative function, and you have the judicial function. If all these functions are concentrated or in only one person, then that is the easiest way to lose liberty and to bring in terror. It's very easy to understand. That's why he says there should not be one organ where all the powers are concentrated. You should have separate organs where each enjoys its own exclusive power with checks and balances. So the executive requires a check. So the judiciary has a check on executive today. And the executive must have a check. The legislature has a check on executive because sometimes it can't sanction money. The legislature is which makes the law, the executive is which implements the law, and the judiciary which interprets the law. So even today we have also taken that more or less. Most of the constitutions, democratic constitutions in the world have taken this principle, and the contribution is to Montesquieu, and especially the American Constitution, Article 1, 2, 3 deal with these three organs, and they owe a great deal. James Madison, the father of American Constitution, he took it from Montesquieu, and they all have, they are much indebted to him. Montesquieu as well, Locke for all the liberties, the English philosopher. So this is his contribution. He has elaborately discussed, and it is easy for any one of us to understand why. See, he beautifully says it is only power which can check power. If a person is powerful, he requires some checks. Otherwise, he becomes absolute. Despot, dictator. He will take everything, and what he says is law, and he will only decide. He will only be the judge. He will only be the executor. He will only be all in all. He says that has to be prevented. So he gives very, very beautiful description of it and reasoning. And so he says only one power can check other power. So that is why we should have this system of checks and balances. So that is how, and I'll take another 10 minutes if you don't mind. Still there are many important points. So this is an important contribution of Montesquieu to the political thought. Then he has a theory of climate. Because many of us may or may not agree, or partially we may agree with him. He has a theory of climate. He says the climatic conditions affect people. Many things it affects. Our customs, our energy, our capacity to do work, our psychology, all these things are affected by the climate. So you have the cold climate people have a particular characteristics. The very warm weather, and if you have very fertile soil, and if you don't have to work hard for produce, then that also again produces a type of people who may be a little lazy. If everything is abundant, nature provides everything. If you don't have to work hard, then you become lazy. But where you have to have hardships, very extreme climate, then you have to fight nature. You have to become very tough. So you become, really tough, brave, courageous. So like that, he has a theory of climate and he classifies that these people are like this. Of course, he says in Asia, he distinguishes between two types of climate, one in the north with extreme cold type, and then you have the tropical side where extremely hot. So he always says it is these people who are in the cold and moderate climate who dominate the other people who are a little lazy. So he says Asia is more prone to despotism than Europe, and he discusses the European climate also, the climate of France. He says it's a very wonderful climate. So he says that is really a moderate climate, where things flourish. And he says between European countries, it is the climatic change is not so much pronounced as in the Asiatic countries. That is why he says in Europe you have small kingdoms, one cannot overtake the other. That's why we have a lot of small kingdoms. So like that he has a theory of climate. Then again his important contribution is he is a well-meaning person. He says every country should prosper, every country should be rich. He says the best way is not going to wage war with another country and go and occupy them and enslave them and colonize them. He says that is not the way. The best way for enriching yourself is trade. So he spoke a lot of things on international trade. How the international trade should grow, and how we should not unnecessarily impose tariff. See, today it is relevant in the context of what Donald Trump is doing and what European countries, China, now they have a trade war. Today there is a trade war in the world because they are imposing heavy duty on the steel, European steel, America, So, and these people are retaliating. Whereas the WTO, World Trade Organization, intention is that as far as possible there should be free trade in the world and there should not be tariff barriers. So these are the beautiful points which he has brought out in his section on commerce and trade, and he emphasizes everything and discusses exchange rate, all that in a very beautiful manner. And he also says there should be an end to slavery. He makes it a point. He doesn't like colonialism. He says international trade is a better way of enriching yourself. So that is thing. Then as far as religion is concerned, he says he is interested in religion as a social phenomenon. He says I am not interested in the absolute truth of the religion and all. He says it should be there so that there is a check on people, their despotism, their immorality, their unethical ways and all. For all these things, there should be again a check, and that is religion. I want that religion, and there can be multiple religions, all can flourish. And he says these religions are needed, and there should be a spirit of toleration, and he is very much against this conversion or proselytization. Another word they say, conversion. He is very much against conversion. So again, no wonder why the Catholic people were very much against it. He says it is a silly thing to convert a person from one religion to another. He says every place has got its religion. You allow them. All religions should flourish. The toleration should be there. So that is his view on religion. And he says, don't think people are going to praise you people by seeing the times in which you have lived, especially when they hear about the Inquisition and all such atrocities. They will think that you are a barbaric people at the time. So that was his castigation for the Catholic clergy. So that I have to tell you. So that was, and later, he was asked to contribute an article to the encyclopedia, on politics. He said, I have already done my volumes, 31 books in a volume, so I will rather write an essay on taste, goût, in French it's called goût. So he wrote a very beautiful essay in 1754 on taste for the Encyclopedia of D'Alembert and Diderot, and in 70, and he worked so hard, he lost his eyesight. Eyesight was failing, and he died in 1755. He died, and he is today remembered, for his contribution to political thought. Thank you. That's what I have to say.